Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming. My name is Jason Westcott. I'm a Principal PM Manager in the Cloud and AI Security Division of Microsoft. Our division handles a lot of the security products that you may use today, Cloud Application Security, Azure Security Center, Azure Identity Protection. These sorts of products are all developed in my group. Personally, I'm responsible for the Microsoft Graph Security API, which is what we're going to talk about today. And also my team is in charge of our internal threat intelligence platform. That threat intelligence platform is used by all of our security products to help determine when things are bad IPs, bad URLs, file hashes, these sorts of things. But today, we're going to talk about the new Microsoft Graph Security API, which we just launched officially in GA on Monday. So let's start with an overview. This is a 300-level talk, which means we're going to get down into the weeds of actually how to use the API. I assume a lot of you have already stopped by our booth, perhaps, or read something about the Security API. Maybe even some of you have begun to play with it. We've been out in beta since April. But I assume also that there are some people in here that don't know too much about it yet. So let's start at the top. First of all, what is this thing? Why are we building it? This API is the single integration point for all of our Microsoft security products. So today we have many different security products. They each have their own API or sets of APIs. They each have their own schema for delivering data to you. So as you purchase those products and try to deploy them in your environments, it takes a lot of time. We do a lot of what we call executive briefing center meetings on campus where we bring clients in to talk to us about their pain points, what they'd like to see. And invariably, we hear a lot of, yeah, we bought Windows Defender ATP, or we bought Azure Information Protection about 5 months ago, have the license for it, but still haven't rolled it out. And that's really disappointing to hear. And this is something that we think this API can help solve. A single API that all of our products sit behind, so you have one integration point to deal with and not 9 or 10. The other thing is when you try to integrate security products into your existing workflows, it's hard. Like I said, everything has its own set of APIs, its own schema. Rationalizing all of these things together takes a lot of time. What we're looking for in the future through this security API is building an ecosystem where it's truly plug-and-play security. If I didn't touch on it enough in the first point, this API is very unique at the company. Not only are all the Microsoft security products sitting behind it, but third-party products are behind it as well. So we're building up an ecosystem. You'll see that we're announcing this week. We have 5 partners already that are actually behind the API. So you can talk to Symantec, for example, through a Microsoft API. You can talk to Palo Alto. Pretty cool stuff. So we think in the future there's going to be a time, in the not-too-distant future, where you could stop using one product, start using another security product, and literally have no integration work to do whatsoever. Because if you're using the same API, the data will still be flowing in the same way, same schema, same authentication. Nothing needs to change. So that's the vision. What exactly are we delivering through this API today? Alerts is what we have made generally available as of Monday. What can you do with alerts? Obviously, security alerts from every Microsoft security product and our integrated third-party products can be available through this API. They all come through in the same schema, as you'll see later. So that means that a network firewall alert from Palo Alto, for example, looks the same as a Microsoft Cloud Application Security alert. If I want to know where the user information is, it's always going to be in the same field. If I want to know where the FQDN of the host is, it's always going to be in the same field. So this very rich schema that has a lot of different state information about different entities like files, processes, hosts, users. All of that is super easy to correlate together. The other thing about the API is it's not just a read API. It's not just about hoovering in information. It's also about manipulating alerts. So one of the problems that we have today is we have lots of different panes of glass. Everybody knows this. 9 different products from Microsoft related to security, third-party products. Your security operations center folks spend a lot of time probably looking at different panes of glass. It's very annoying. What invariably ends up happening is that enterprises, organizations like yourselves, spend a lot of time pulling data, alerts, from these different systems and putting it into a new system, something like ServiceNow, Resilient Software, Splunk, what have you, and you work with the alerts in that context. Well, what happens is you'll do things like resolve an alert, assign it to somebody, put a comment in it, and you have another employee that's looking at the original portal from where that alert came from, and it's never updated. It just sits there, continue to glow red, looks like it's never been looked at, and that's kind of been the state of the state for a long time. Well, this API can help solve that problem as well. The next part that's not generally available today, but we're looking at, is context. So when you're dealing with security alerts, you're building applications that deal with security alerts, and you're triaging them. One of the things that people need to know is more information about the entities found in the alert. If I have jws@microsoft.com ran a suspicious PowerShell, as a security operator, I don't know who jws@microsoft.com is. I have to go into another system and look that up. I don't know that PowerShell may have run on server 21, right? I don't know anything about server 21. I have to go to some configuration management database, maybe find out more about that. Well, the reality is all of your security products know a ton of information about JWS. They know a ton of information about server 21. So we're going to make that available to you in a uniform way, same schema, so that you can just query the graph and say, give me everything you know about server 21, and all your security products are going to answer what they know about that. The other area that we want to tackle with this API in the near future is automation and orchestration. So we know this is a big pain point. Even at Microsoft, if I want to do something in the security response space, as simple as resetting JWS's password, I can't do it. As a security responder, I don't have the rights to do it. I don't have the tools to do it. I have to cut a ticket to the identity management team, wait for the SLA, and they'll fulfill the request, and that's how things get done. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a single client application that was dealing with security alerts? I triaged everything, found out the problem, wanted to take a remediation action, and I could just right-click and say reset Jason's password, and it would just go do it. We want to make those applications super easy to build, and we think we can do it. So let's take a little look at what we call our architecture slide. This is kind of how the API is built foundationally. At the bottom, we have the security providers, we call them. That's a term that I'll use throughout the talk, these security providers. So all of our Microsoft security products that you see here, this is really all of our security suite, is represented and behind this API. So you can communicate to all of them through the API today. And as I mentioned, we've got third-party products, and we're building up this ecosystem as fast as possible. Again, we just GA'd on Monday, so this ecosystem is going to grow very, very fast. But these are the 5 partners that were able to deliver something for us by the time Ignite. So we truly appreciate the work that they did and thank them. Palo Alto, Illumio, Lookout, Contrast, and Symantec are all ready to go. So you can actually communicate with them through a Microsoft API, which is very cool. Above that is the Microsoft Graph. So this is the Microsoft Graph Security API. For those that are not super familiar with Microsoft Graph, it's kind of the umbrella set of APIs for our company. It is not technically a graph in the mathematical sense. It does have relationships between entities, but think of it more as just the set of Microsoft APIs that we're putting all of our effort behind right now. So traditionally, the graph has had a lot of Office workloads, productivity suites in it. Azure Active Directory, Intune, all of this great stuff has been in Graph for some time. We have simply extended the Microsoft Graph to include security entities. And so as I said, the first thing that we've introduced is the alerts entity, followed by Secure Score, which is in beta, and we'll demonstrate all of these in a minute. And then those future areas around context and automation and configuration are forthcoming. So because this is Microsoft Graph, we use common libraries, common authentication. So you authenticate once to the graph, you have access to everything in it. So that makes it super easy. Common SDKs for everything. These folks up top are building client applications that are using this API already. So Anomaly is pulling in alerts from this API and enriching it with their threat intelligence. Demisto has done some really cool stuff, pulling in alerts, parsing them, and making automation tasks available through other sets of APIs. And then, of course, our SIEM partners, Splunk, QRadar, Sumo Logic, all of these are already integrating with the API to allow you to pull in the data into the SIEM systems that you use. So I assume many of you are part of your security organizations at your company and maybe writing custom applications or know people at your company that should be writing custom applications that would take advantage of this API. That's great. Some of you may be software vendors or managed security service providers that write your own tools that you'd like other people to purchase. That's great as well. We want to have a great, rich ecosystem of client applications taking advantage of this API. We actually had our first production integration last week. So the Azure Active Directory portal integrated with the Secure Score through this API. Needless to say, our traffic ballooned from a few hundred queries a day to about 100,000 queries a day. So great for us, but just the first of many integrations that we're going to see in the future. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. Like I said, this is a 300-level course, so I'm sure you want to see the nitty-gritty. If you're going to write an application, a client application that uses this API, how do I get started? We have lots of materials out there, lots of documentation. I'll point you to all of that at the end of this. But let's actually just walk through an example of, let's say I'm Wizard Security, and I'm a software vendor, and I want to write a client application and build a dashboard that shows security alerts for any company that wants to buy my product. And we're going to say Contoso is the organization that's going to buy this product, and we'll kind of walk through the flow of how Wizard builds the app and how Contoso consumes the app. So the first thing is the Wizard Security company is going to register an application in their own Azure Active Directory. And they need to do this in the Azure Active Directory v2 portal, which is apps.dev.microsoft.com. This is the same experience if you're going to write an application for your own company's use. You register the application there, and part of the thing when you're setting up your registration is you choose which sets of APIs you want to integrate with. And you can see here, there's a section just for Microsoft Graph. And what you're doing here when you're registering this section is telling the application that it wants to use this sets of permissions. It doesn't grant them any permissions. It's just saying that this application is going to want to need these permissions when the organization that's going to run it runs it. So in our case, what we're going to ask for to use the security API is we're going to register the application with securityevents.read.all and securityevents.readwrite.all. Now you can see here there's two kind of section headers. There's a delegated permissions and application permissions. We'll get into that in a minute, but just for the sake of this demo, we'll use delegated permissions. And you can also see that it says admin only. That's very, very important. There's different sets of permissions in Microsoft Graph. Some of them are able to be consented by a particular user. Some of them have to be consented by the organization's admin. In the case of the security data, which we're talking about, it's very sensitive, so we don't want just anybody at the company to be able to do this. So the tenant admin does need to be the one to grant these permissions, which is why it says admin only there. And lastly, as Wizard Security, I'm going to make sure that in the manifest for my application, it says available to other tenants is set to true, so that Contoso, in this case, can go ahead and use it. So now Wizard Security has registered their application. Again, this is just, think of this as paperwork. It's not actually writing code or anything. It's just registering with Microsoft that I have this application I want other people to use, and it's going to need these sets of permissions. Now Wizard's going to go write their application. In this case, it's going to be a hosted website, and we'll show you kind of what it looks like. But now I'm Contoso, and I want to actually use this application. So I bought a license from Wizard, and now I want to start playing with it. As I said, these permissions that the application is going to ask for, and you can see what happens the very first time that somebody logs into the application, is it's going to say this app would like to read your organization's security events, and this application would like to update your organization's security events. These require admin consent, and so the only person at the company or people at the company are people with tenant-level admin privileges, and any of those can accept this dialog box, and when that happens, this application will now be consented for Contoso, and only for Contoso. And at that point, they can go ahead and start using it. So let's stop for a minute and go back to that app-only versus delegated conversation, because that's important to understand. Again, Wizard Security has the opportunity to register their application in either of these modes, or frankly, it can do both. But let's assume one or the other. Let's talk about app-only first. So app-only permissions, like security-events.read.all, require admin permissions. And so if you're running an app-only mode, in order to get access to the security API, the application authenticates to the API, and it presents its identity, and it presents its application secret, but it doesn't present any information about who's using the application. In fact, it doesn't have to have a user. This is a common use case for building daemons or services on the back end that want to talk to the API that don't have a user interface. And as long as the organization has granted consent, as we talked about, this application will be able to use the API. Now, if the application is using, it does have a user interface and has users logging into it, but it is running an app-only mode, then the client application is solely responsible for enforcing user role-based access. In other words, it has to say, who from Contoso can actually do what operations in my user interface. Because the API, what my team writes, is not going to get any information about the user that's using the app. We're running an app-only mode, so we just don't know. We just make sure that the tenant has authorized the app, and we say we're good to go. So be forewarned, if you're running an app-only mode, it's highly privileged. The other mode is delegated, and this is what we've assigned these roles to for this Wizard application. In this context, the application, again, does need to be granted by the tenant administrator, but in this case, when it presents itself to the API, it's going to present its app and app secret, but it's also going to present the user that's using it. And so what we'll do in the API is check that the user has a certain role in the directory. And I'll show you in a minute where those roles are assigned. But they are limited administrator roles of security reader or security administrator if you need to update any of the entities in the API. So only when these two things happen, that the app has been granted permissions and the user has the right role, only then will the API grant access. So in this case, one of the added benefits of running in delegated mode is it takes the burden of role-based access off of the client application, but it also allows the security providers, and again, I use that term, these are the security services behind the API, it allows them to see who's using the application and allows them to enforce role-based access. So for example, if you'd gone into Windows Defender and configured my European SOC employees to be monitoring this set of machines and my United States SOC employees to be monitoring a different set of machines, so I didn't want each set of employees looking at alerts from the other sets of machines, and you set that up through security groups and all that good stuff. Well, now Windows Defender has the ability to enforce that role-based access because we're running in delegated mode. It has the context of the user, it has the roles, and it can look up that stuff in its own access tables. So these are the two modes, good to understand. Like I said, in our case, we're running in delegated mode for this example. So the Contoso administrator is going to assign anybody that he wants to use this application with a certain role. You would never assign both of these roles to a person, but I just highlighted them just so you could see them. Again, it's security administrator for folks that need to actually make updates through the API, or security reader if you're just going to be reading information through the API. So in this case, Adele is being assigned these roles by the tenant administrator. So once that happens, our Contoso friends can go ahead and use the app. So let's see what that looks like, and let's see what kind of things we can do in the API. Of course, my machine went to sleep while I was prattling on, so bear with me. All right, hopefully you can see this. This is a demo app that we wrote. It's actually available in 3 languages. This is the C# version, but this is on GitHub, freely available for any of you to download and try out yourselves. Just compile it, run it, and log in with your own credentials, and you're off to the races. Again, much easier to do this in a demo tenant where you have full admin privileges and you can consent for the application, because that is required, as we talked about. If you're doing this for your own organization, what will happen is you'll log in and it will throw up a thing that says, hey, your organization hasn't consented for this. If you're the admin, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, sorry. So, again, this is the demo app, and it shows you, we're going to play with alerts first. So this is the first entity, the one that went generally available on Monday. So this is a federated system. It's really important to understand that. I get a lot of questions about the security graph and, how are you storing all of this massive amounts of data, and what are you doing with it, and where is my data actually living, and is it compliant with GDPR and all this good stuff? Well, it turns out none of that is really relevant because we are not storing data. We are a federated system. So this API, under the covers, the way it works is you make a query. It hits our service, the Graph Security API service, and we federate that call out to all of your licensed products. And they respond to us, and we aggregate that together and return the result to the client. So we're not actually storing any of that data. Your data lives with Windows Defender, wherever you've asked it to live. Your data lives with Microsoft Cloud Application Security in whatever data center you've asked for it to live in. And there it stays. So when you make a simple query like get alerts, this application, again, was designed to help developers learn how to get started. So we timed out, again, talking too long. And every time I do that, I get a lovely error. So when I say get top one, you would think, well, I'm going to get one alert. But again, we are a federated system. And so the nuance here is that for every provider, every security product that Contoso has in their organization, they're going to give back the top one. Because again, this is a federated system. So you can see here, I've got one alert from each provider. The provider's in the right-hand column here. As a client application, I don't care what products you have in your environment. I just say, give me top one. I don't know or care what products you have. And the beauty is, all of the alerts that come back are in the exact same schema. So it's super easy for me to deal with them. If I'm dealing with the client SDK, the objects are super easy to parse. I can do things like alert.description, alert.title. All of your IntelliSense things work just fine with the SDK. So it's really, really easy to parse these objects when they come back. Let's take a look at the schema. So if we click on an alert here from Azure Security Center, for example, you can see all the different fields, the normal title created, who's involved with the alert, the description of the alert. But there's these very rich state information as well. So information, we'll save source materials for a minute here, but information about the user, information about the hosts or network connections or processes. Again, rich taxonomy and a very strict taxonomy. So if I want to know where to find alerts related to certain command lines, this is where I'm going to find it all the time. It'll be under process command lines. And all of this stuff, because it's strictly enforced, I can search on it. If I want to know every alert that has to do with Douglas F, I can just quickly make that search. You can see the syntax I'm using is basically just searching for Douglas F. Again, I don't need to know about Azure Security Center, or Windows Defender, or Palo Alto. All I need to know is I'm looking for any alerts from anybody related to Douglas. And so here we go. We got some Windows Defender, Azure Security Center alerts, and an identity one as well, and a Palo Alto. So super easy as a client developer to work with this API because, again, I don't have to truly understand what my customer has in their environment. I just know that whatever they have is going to come back looking very, very similar. So what else can we do? If I go back and query for those alerts again. This is part of the Microsoft Graph, all up. So, of course, need to get rid of those filters. All right, here we go. We have our one alert from everybody. So let's choose an alert again. I'll choose that same Azure Security Center one because I know it had some information about users. Because it's part of Microsoft Graph, I'm building a client application. I'm already authenticated to the graph. Well, why don't I think about using other parts of the graph with my application? Not just security alerts, but I can query the user object from Azure Active Directory, for example. Pull in the picture of the user, pull in his full name, who his manager is, what department he works for, where his office is. All this rich information is basically free. And it's stuff that was previously hard to do, right? If I'm writing a client application for security, I'd have to go ahead and read all the Azure Active Directory documentation, learn how to work with their native APIs. But Microsoft Graph, same authentication, same syntax, it's just a different entity type. So we're going to be adding a lot more contextual information into this in the future so that you can well imagine working with an alert that has to do with hosts and files and processes and being able to just say, well, give me everything anybody knows about this file hash, for example. So that'll be coming soon. The other thing I can do here is subscribe to alerts. So subscriptions are really done through webhooks. And the way this works is instead of querying the API and saying, give me security alerts for the last 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes later calling back again, I can just query, make a persistent query, and every time anything happens that matches that query, I'm going to get notified about it. So how does that work? You have to have a notification listener service. Let's refresh that. So this is a little thing that's part of the demo app. When you download it, it'll just run automatically when you click the notification button. So it spins up a little listener service in the background. And what that does is it's listening for notifications that match my subscription. So let's say I wanted to subscribe to all high severity alerts. So again, the query for that is super easy. Just give me all alerts related to that are high. Here they are in the system. And I'm going to make a subscription. So let's make sure that that worked. Yep. So this all worked. I've now got a subscription there. I can go to my subscriptions tab and see that. I may have more than one copy. So you can list all of your subscriptions as a client developer. You have to keep track of these. They do have expiration dates on them. They don't last forever, so you have to renew them after every so often. At any rate, now that I've done that, I can go ahead and see how you fire a subscription. So let's take an Illumio alert that is high, and I will go ahead and manage it. So again, we talked about this earlier. We have a lot of different security panes of glass. They don't always stay in sync. Some show the same alert red, some show it green and resolved. This API allows you to keep everything in sync. So if I take one of these alerts, mark it as resolved, say it was a true positive, for example. Say this was a severe issue, I can go ahead and update that alert. Goodness, the demo gods are not with me today. That was the first time I've seen that one. Let's try that again. Well, just for odds sake, let me choose a different alert. Who knows, maybe there was something funny about that one. All right, so we went ahead and updated that one. Again, this is an app that was developed to help developers understand how to code against this. So you can see that instead of getting, we actually patched. And so on our notifications page, which you saw me refresh earlier, we now have a new message that popped up that said, hey, something matched our query. In this case, our query, I can blow this up. The query that got matched was this subscription. Here's the subscription ID. And here is, there's a subscription ID. Here's the entity ID that actually fired this alert. So as an app developer, I will go ahead and query the graph for that entity ID, and I'll be able to get that payload. So you can see I could make a subscription that says, just give me all alerts all the time. And you'll just get notified every time any product ever emits a new alert, you'll get a notification, and you can go back and fetch it. So pretty slick. So the other thing that we introduced here, announced at Ignite, is the Secure Score integration with this API. So Secure Score has been around for a while. Started off as the Microsoft Secure Score. Think of it as kind of like your FICO credit rating, only it's a security risk for your organization. So there's three parts to the Microsoft Secure Score. There's your posture with Office, your posture with Azure, and your posture with Windows. And the three of those together make up your combined Microsoft Secure Score. They're all similar in that it's a set of recommended configuration settings that Microsoft offers. and recommends you adhere to. And then we rate how well your organization complies with those. Certainly not mandatory, but it's just a reference point. Helps you understand maybe some places where you should shore up to your security. So the total score, in this case being 657, is just a product of the 3 different totals. Kind of like your FICO score is 800 or so. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense empirically. It's not 0 to 100. It is what it is. So you can get access to all of this through the API. I won't dig into too much detail about what's in here. What I can do is show you that you can get to it from a number of places. And this is actually being powered by the API live. So you can see it showed in preview. They just lit this up 2 weeks ago, like I said, which really spiked our traffic. Because every time anybody browses to their Azure Active Directory portal now, they get the score here. So this hits our API. So I can click on it. This is, again, the same demo tenant that we were just looking at. So I can see my identity secure score here. It's 42 out of 50. I can dig into what those policies are and what I might want to look at. If I want to look at my M365 all-up secure score, the Microsoft secure score, I just click that. It launches a new page which shows the Office, Windows, and identity all together. So hopefully that gives you a great idea of the things that are available in the API, how to get started using it. Again, as I said, the demo app that we saw, that was our Wizard Security demo app, is freely available in 3 different languages on GitHub. We have a lot of resources available to help you get started. One of the biggest feedback items, what GitHub has done, a lot of surveys, they said the #1 dissatisfaction with any API is documentation. I think we can all agree this is the weak spot of many an API, and we want to make sure that our API doesn't fall into this trap. So we're putting a lot of effort into making sure the documentation is good. It's not just reference documentation about how to use the alert entity. It's how to walk through authenticating against the security API, how to think about consent, how to think about subscriptions, and where to go to hook up your SIEM to the API and get connectors. And we've made sure that the docs are quite comprehensive, so I encourage you to check them out. The code, as I said, the code samples at the top link there is Graph Security API code. It takes you to a Python, a C#, and a Node.js version of the app that you just saw. We have the SDKs available in many, many different languages. We have a robust community, so if you have any questions as you begin to play with this API, please go to the community, sign up for the community, and participate in the discussions there. And of course, we're on Stack Overflow monitoring the conversations there as well. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. I put this up here not because you necessarily need to go to a session on Wednesday, since it's past Wednesday already, but the beauty of Ignite is that all of the sessions are available online after the fact. So if you want to go back and look at a session previously, that's what they're there for. So I encourage you to do that. I also encourage you, if you want to get your hands dirty, more so than just hearing me talk about how to get started with the API, we have 2 workshops. It's the same workshop repeated twice that my coworker Michael is going to run later. Today is the first one, BRK3022, and then tomorrow he'll be doing a repeat of that session in the morning. In this session, you're actually going to build the application you just saw from the ground up. So you'll learn how to authenticate against the API, write that code, which is frankly the hardest part. It's just standard OAuth authentication, but it's just the way it is. It's the hardest part. So he'll walk you through all of that. You'll actually be authenticating against the same tenant that you just saw here, so you'll be pulling in alerts, just like we saw, and parsing them with the SDK, and learning how to do all of that good stuff. So I highly encourage you, if you really want to get your hands dirty, quick bootstrap will be to attend those workshops later today or tomorrow. So with that, I'm open for any questions that you have. Step up to the microphone if you would. But with that, hopefully you guys will be either building applications for your own organization or pestering ISVs to build applications that integrate with this API to make your life easier. Or if you are an ISV, definitely get started with it. We have a lot of MSSPs in particular that have written applications. We've noticed as we watch the traffic over the summer, a lot of MSSPs are taking advantage of this on behalf of their customers because they find it a one-stop shop for all security alerts, so it's a great thing. So thank you very much. Any questions, please let me know. Thanks.